You want to eat? Doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit because getting up is not graceful. I'm not going to sit. I'm just going to stand here.
And I would be afraid that that would like roll.
It does have breaks, but it's just easier to just stay steady for another minute.
Justine didn't row, did she?
She did sometimes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So I'm not blind.
And she had a black belt.
Yeah, I just don't want anyone concentrating on my dress or my necklace.
You will find, and they're going to be.
Oh, you already.
Very, very excited. I mean, the people who hear.
Oh, I do need. I need to.
Oh, I recognize the board.
I need to get the board with the
Thank you for lighting that tea light. That's really wonderful.
You want me to say the chalice lighting? You want me to light the candle with the chalice off as well?
Why don't I light it while you invite people?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes. Absolutely. Ritual is important.
And you've got your seat saved with the soul.
Yes. In front of a couple that's over.
Well, thank you for printing this out. I'll turn my phone off now. Silence my phone. We start. No, this is fine. Just let people get settled. Yeah, I know. I'm just letting people get settled. Good morning. I'm Louise Gephardt, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, as well as the Worship Committee and the Music Committee. And it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. If you are visiting and would like more information about our congregation, please stop at the visitors table in the fellowship hall. We will be happy to answer your questions. And please take this second to make sure your cell phones or other devices are silenced. Today, we welcome to our pulpit Reverend Erica Hewitt, who lives in Bath, where she serves as the Minister of Worship Arts for our Unitarian Universalist Association. Erica is recognized throughout the UU movement as a proponent of worship that's both relational and centered in spiritual practice. She also has a thriving wedding ministry that extends throughout New England. Erica's last visit to our pulpit was in May of 2015, which seems like a really long time. And so she's very delighted to return to us this morning. Thank you. Welcome, Erica.
Please join me in saying the words of our unison chalice lighting affirmation. As we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us a connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other.
Good morning. I begin every worship service with a grounding text, which I think of as a North Star. The North Star being the point that we might travel toward without ever actually arriving. Its purpose is orientation. And so today's service is grounded in a pair of texts. One is a quote from the late Bell Hooks, a Black author, feminist, social activist. And the second one is from David Rico, a white psychotherapist grounded in Buddhism who lives in California. So I invite you to either read them on the screen or just listen, read them silently, or take them in with eyes closed as we read these texts to you.
Spiritual life is first and foremost about commitment to a way of thinking and behaving that honors principles of interbeing and interconnectedness.
Maybe there's a word or two in that text that grabbed you. As you listen to the second text, see if there's a word or two that grabs you. Love works automatically at times, but mostly it works because we work on it. Whatever does not work requires work. Since every adult has things to work on, refusal to work is the equivalent of reluctance to relate as an adult. Again, see what any words stick to you. Now, these texts give rise to questions that we might hold throughout the service, throughout worship. But these questions that I'm about to pose might reveal different answers to you tomorrow or next week, or the next time you notice that you are struggling or celebrating in a relationship of any kind. Here are the two questions I invite you to wrestle with if they're helpful to you. The first is, in which of my relationships do I most readily honor interconnectedness? The second, in which of my relationships do I feel reluctance or even resentment about doing the work of maintaining love? Let's let those questions hang in the air as we sing together. There's been a change to the service. The correct words will appear on screen. Thank you to our heroes in the booth. We are going to rise in body or in spirit for Morning Has Broken, hymn number 38. Morning has broken. Praise for the morning.
This morning, I'm standing in for the the pastoral care associate, which is why I forgot to get the book. This morning, we are happy to be welcoming of Sandy's niece in Hawaii. With our children and grandchildren, nature is beautiful. The sea and the woods are magnificent, and I don't recognize the handwriting. So, if that's someone here and you'd like to identify yourself. No, I guess not. Okay. Oh, yes.
That's my wife and 8 sons, and we had quite a time in Hawaii.
We celebrate with you. That's wonderful. There are no sorrows. However, I think it's appropriate to have a time of silence for those sorrows that remain in our hearts, that are heavy with us, that are heavy with our loved ones. And to the people who are not with us this morning in person here, I'd like to remind you that if you're not attending in-person services and would like a joy or concern read from the pulpit, you can send an email to uucbjoysandconcerns@gmail.com. And if you have a concern that you'd like to discuss in private, please speak with a pastoral care associate. Anyone, I don't know that there are any here this morning, but normally they wear light blue name tag, banners or ribbons on their name tags. This time we're going to take our weekly collection of your gifts and offerings to not only this church, but our Charity with Soul, which this month is the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which is a human rights supporting organization that represents us in places all over the world where we have partnerships with those who are helpful to their neighbors in need. So at this time, the morning offering will be gratefully received.
You know, ours is a tradition of, we say, the free pulpit, which is wonderful, but to me, the pulpit usually feels like a leash, so I don't preach from one. And, you know, I'm wishing that I had done this earlier, so I'm going to do it now. I'd like to invite you to engage with those rough grounding texts a little more deeply. So what I'd like to do, the sound booth, you need to do nothing. What I'd like you to do is just hear them again. And I'm going to do them in the opposite order. I'm going to start with the judgy one. And then I'm going to ask you to just sit with me in some quiet. And if you're willing to, speak into the quiet the word or words that light up for you. Maybe because they're daunting, or maybe because they're empowering. You don't need to know why. Okay, so I'm going to read these to you again, starting with David Rico. Love works automatically at times, but mostly it works because we work on it. Whatever does not work requires work. Since every adult has things to work on, refusal to work is the equivalent of reluctance to relate as an adult. Now let me read you the words of Bell Hooks. Spiritual life is first and foremost about commitment to a way of thinking and behaving that honors principles of interbeing and interconnectedness. So let's just breathe for a moment. And if you find yourself hearing one or more of those words echoing in your mind, you can just speak it into this space.
Reluctance.
Commitment. Spiritual life.
Intention.
Work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
Adult.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I was talking with Nell before the service, and by the way, I want to thank Lucy and Nell for being wonderful, wonderful ambassadors and partners today. Ambassadors of you, the congregation. Before this summer comes to an end, I will have officiated at some point, I don't know when, my 300th wedding of my career. And so that means that for almost the 300th time, I'm going to repeat the pep talk, which is actually a homily, that I deliver at every wedding rehearsal. So what I do at the end of a wedding rehearsal is I gather the couple and their wedding party and their parents, and I say to them, this wedding is all about the couple. It's about our confidence in their future. But we, the insiders, are doing something sacred too. Something that I'm aware of as a pastor, and I always use that word. I say, what I know about tomorrow is that among all of the wedding guests, some of them will use the couple's love story as an opportunity to joyfully and gratefully reconnect to the story of love in their lives, or a story of love in their lives. But some guests are going to use that love story to be drawn to their own more painful story about love. And then I explain to the couple and their wedding party that we are reenacting an ancient human ritual, that we are enacting our confidence in love itself. We are inviting everyone present to believe in love, even if they stopped believing in love a long time ago. Yeah, and that sobers things right up. Sometimes it goes over the head of 20-somethings groomsmen, and sometimes the parents come up to me and thank me, the parents who have had their own decades of experience with love. But you see, I believe in naming true things out loud. Many ministers consider themselves truth tellers. So I believe in saying hard things out loud, things that may not be gilded truths that are lifted right out of the pages of fairy tales. So, for example, what I'm saying to the couple on their wedding party is relationships are hard. This is the subtext. Love works mostly because we work on it, and sometimes it's happy, easy work. But it's work. And another truth that's hard to name out loud but important to love out loud is people are not loving and loyal all the time. And it feels liberating to me to say that, if only because, for one, truths have the power to dissolve shame, right? When we name things out loud, sometimes it reminds us that when we struggle to maintain love and loyalty, it does not mean that we are unlovable or less than whole. It means we're human. And telling the truth that relationships can be hard, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, so start to think about work relationships, family relationships, community, neighbors, friends, thank you. Relationships require work from us. That's an empowering truth, right? I think it's a gift to remember that in many of our relationships, not all, many, we have choices about how to name our expectations, our boundaries, where to compromise, when to forgive, right? And then there's the wonder of it all. I mean, honestly, it takes my breath away. This mystery, this glorious mystery that despite having been hurt, despite having many stories to make evident the fact that people are not loving and loyalty all the time, and despite the fact that we cause hurt to other people, we over and over have the capacity to turn back to connection, to compassion. We choose to do the work of maintaining love. And so all that we could say about showing up to do the work of love and honor interbeing, and there's a lot to say, you could do a whole year of sermons about that. Today what I'm talking about the fact that I'm so often struck by how clumsy many of us are, including me, and how poorly equipped we can be about putting in that work of love at the end of relationships. Right, so I'm talking about all kinds of things. I'm talking about someone moving away. I'm talking about someone leaving a role, like a job. Someone entering hospice. Someone crosses a hard-line boundary in our lives and we know that we need them out of our lives. Or we run out of emotional resources or patience or love, and we know that a relationship is ending, has ended, is over. So the question is, how do we keep living our values of honoring interconnectedness, not just throughout a relationship, but when it comes to an end? There's this church consultant named Roy Oswald, and when he talks about leave-taking, he uses the metaphor of a thistle field. Thistles, those spiky flower plants. He grew up in rural Saskatchewan as a kid, a long time ago, decades ago, and he and his brothers would have to go to school. They were very poor, without shoes. They would walk to school and walk home without shoes. And it was a long walk home. And he remembers and he talks about the fact that there was a shortcut. And on days when they just couldn't wait to get home and go fishing, he would watch his brothers look at a 20-foot span of thistle And instead of taking the long road home, they would dash across the thistle field, yelping and screaming in pain. And at the end, sit down on the ground. Have you ever stepped on a thistle, even by accident? Right? Talk about avoidance. So he says, I can still vividly remember the experience. And he uses the story to illustrate how some people approach goodbyes. He says, they rightly assume that there will be pain involved, so their approach is to run through it as fast as they can. And I get it. I get it. The work of acknowledging grief or loss or awkwardness or resentment or gratitude, that's labor to have a difficult conversation. It's very draining. And yet when we rush through goodbyes, sometimes we deprive a relationship of the love and the respect that it merits. So I thought about this thistle field and this image of a young Roy Oswald running through it in bare feet. When something unusual happened on a visit to my chiropractor's office recently. And what you need to know is that I was a patient there for 6 years. So 6 years, month after month, year after year, in and out I would go. And I'm going to use a fake name. The receptionist was a woman named Dee Dee. It's not her real name. When I tell you that her smile and warmth and love at that front desk was a form of ministry, I'm not exaggerating. I think sometimes showing up and seeing Dee Dee at the desk made me feel better than getting an actual chiropractic adjustment from my doctor. So it always lifted my day. It always left me feeling better. And so on this one afternoon, I was getting ready to leave, and she stood up at her desk and came out, and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" Now, this was unusual, but I was not going to turn down a hug from Dee Dee. So I said, "Of course," and she gave me a hug. Do you know what's coming? I think some of you know what's coming. Yeah, so it's not as bad as it could be. The next time I went to the office, there was a stranger at the desk. And I asked my doctor, where's Dee Dee? Is she on vacation? And my doctor said, oh, Dee Dee decided it was time to retire early. And my face, I'm sure, absolutely fell. And the doctor said, she didn't want to have to go through goodbyes with every patient. So, you know, the small joy is I'm really glad that she didn't have a tragic ending. This was, we think, I imagine she's still enjoying retirement. And part of me understands why she did what she did. Dee Dee took a run through the thistles because she did not want to have to say goodbye to dozens and dozens of people. She did not want to bear up under our hugs, our well wishes, our gifts, and our tears. I get it. But I cannot be the only patient who needed to thank her, who needed to look at her and say, you have meant so much to me. Thank you for the gift you've given me in my life. So I had to grieve for her absence twice. I had to grieve not ever seeing her again, but I also had to grieve that losing the opportunity to say goodbye, right? And honestly, I felt betrayed. I felt like she tacitly engaged in deception, because when she came out from the desk and said, can I give you a hug? She knew it was goodbye, and I didn't. But some of us have done this too, in our own way. I've done this in smaller ways. And if you've ever done an end run around a meaningful goodbye, I don't want you to feel guilty. That's not what I'm after here, because guilt is not going to be fruitful. Just let that go. Instead, joining me in getting curious. That's where the growth is. Curious about what does interconnectedness look like when we know that a relationship is ending. What, if anything, would make it easier to put our love into action, because love is an action, when it comes to an ending that honors the other person? Now, if those questions are not meaningful to you right now, I'm going to return to the broader questions that I posed at the beginning of our service. And I'm going to read those out loud, and they'll be on the screen. And Nell is going to play for a couple of minutes. And then I'll briefly offer some reflections at the end of her music. I leave you with these questions just to sit with for your own answers. In which of my relationships do I most readily honor interconnectedness? And in which of my relationships do I feel reluctance or even resentment about doing the work of maintaining love? I can almost feel the space filling with names and faces and memories and gratitude and regrets, right? That's what church is for, to let us bring that. So just, even though it's not out loud, I honor that. I said that I believe in naming things out loud even when they're difficult. So here's another truth. Pains me. If you knew me well, you'd know how much this pains me. We can't control other people or the choices they make. We can only control what we do with it, how we respond. So that means when someone makes a hurtful choice, and honestly, the story I just described to you with Dee Dee, on a scale of 1 to 10, that was like a 4. So when someone makes a really hurtful choice, like I'm talking 7, 8, 9, 12, we're going to be presented with another opportunity for spiritual practice. That's how I view it. So in this case, when we talk about the 9s and 10s, possibly, I'm thinking about ghosting when it comes to goodbyes. Now, ghosting is not what I described earlier, not really. And here's what I want you to hear, and I'll tell you what ghosting is, but let me tell you what it's not. It's not losing touch. It's not drifting apart. It's not being overwhelmed in life and thinking about your friend that you haven't talked to for 5 years. That's not ghosting. Ghosting is one person's choice to sever a connection by avoiding all and any contact. One day you're tethered to a person through a river of connection that is flowing mutually between you, and the next day it is gone. And if it happens to you, you are alone, sending messages, reaching out into the ether. You're trying to decide between concern or panic and despair, confusion. And it feels, this is not the intention most of the time, but it feels absolutely cruel. Because silence feels weaponized. When we're trying to reach someone we're connected to and they have no interest in being reached. Now, I know this because it's happened to me twice significantly. Once it was a romantic partner and I healed from that. Another time it was from a lifelong friend who was like a sister to me. And in both instances, I was shaken up, and it has taken a long time to heal. It took a long time to let go of the shame of thinking that being ghosted was a reflection on me. If you've been ghosted, I hope you know what I mean. To remember that even when someone removes themselves from a relationship that I thought was important, I can still find opportunities for spiritual growth and spiritual practice. So I'm just going to offer you some examples as we move toward a time of ritual. One example, it's a spiritual practice for me to simply sit with grief and mourn a loss, rather than seeking out a shortcut that relieves us of this work or burying it, right? I always ask, if I call it prayer and if I call it God, my main prayer in life is, may I not go numb. May I just be awake and feel it all. Another example, it's a spiritual practice to tell the story of our hurt, our being hurt, over and over until the story changes and we are less a victim and they are less of a fill in the blank, bleep word. And the story evolves to the point where we know that we are a whole being who knows that our wholeness can never be taken away. It's a spiritual practice to allow the why did they do this to dissolve and evolve, and for us to claim the liberating, empowering truth that I have agency in the relationships of mine that remain. And of course, it's always a spiritual practice, and a wondrous one, to choose to turn back toward love and to believe any kind of love. Again, I'm not talking about romantic love. To believe that love is possible even though we have been hurt by it. So maybe as you've listened to these thoughts about endings, you are thinking about a particular person or a regret or a story. So as we shift into a time of being present to one another, there is a vase of water and stones here. Nell is going to play again for just a few minutes. You can, if you wish, Lucy is going to bring forward a little dish of salt. Lucy, you feel free to bring that up. If you, I called this a ritual of letting go. Let me say something about this. Letting go seems very tidy and final to me, and loss is never tidy and final. So think of this as a setting down. If you are thinking of a story or a person or a hurt, and it's come up for you today, and you would like to set it down and let the arms of the universe hold it and take the burden for you, feel free to just come up and put some salt in the water, turning the water into either symbolic of the tears you may have shed about it, or your letting go of bitterness, whatever might serve you and your heart. And again, if you don't want to come forward to do any of that, that's fine. Simply listen and breathe and be as Nell plays music for us. Thank you, Nell. we move through a sea of great goodness, interconnected, ripples always moving outward. And so we open our hearts to everything that is real and present for us today. First, for any past sorrows, regrets, losses, griefs. Knowing that we all form this container, this vessel, where we can bring that pain and know that we're not alone. Like a great ship cutting through the ocean, sometimes a hull gets bogged down by sticky, tight barnacles in the hundreds and the thousands, creating drag, creating friction. May we find practices and people and tools that help us scrape off the burdens, the friction, all of the things that stick to us so that we don't move through our life with as much ease as we would like. May our hearts grow elastic enough to be curious instead of judgmental toward those who have hurt us. May forgiveness be a very real hope. And may we turn over again and again. May we turn toward love, whatever that looks like in front of us in any given moment. Amen. Our closing hymn has very powerful words. The hymn is Just as Long as I Have Breath. It's number 6. Would you rise in body or in spirit as we sing this meditation together?
Closing words are by David Rico. What makes us human beings so uniquely wonderful in this puzzling universe is that we never give up on love.
Against all odds, with no guarantee of being loved in return, out of the hate and hurt so often handed us, in the face of the sad suffering history has let us see, We go on loving.
What deep respect we're worthy of for this capacity of ours to make love out of anything and to let it last.
May you know yourself to be a good gift, lovable and whole, and may you seek out ways to spin the web of love as you go from this place. Go in peace and go in love.